Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining today. We'll get started here in just a couple minutes as a few more people trickle in. While you're waiting, pull up the chat window. It's at the bottom of the Zoom bar there. Pull up the chat and let me know where you're calling in from. It's a nice, beautiful sunny day here in central Canada. Not too cold. Snow is kind of melting a little bit, so we're getting off pretty easy this winter. Usually it would be closer to -40 this time of year. Okay, so let me start to share my screen as we just get set up here. Okay, it looks like it should be that one. So hopefully you can see my screen now. And we'll get started here in just a minute. So I see someone has their hand up. By all means, shoot your question into the chat window and I'll get your question answered. Okay, right at the top of the hour. So we're going to start on time because we like commissioning that's on time. So we're going to stick to schedule here. This presentation should be about an hour. I want to try and keep it to that. Sometimes if there's lots of good questions, maybe we go past the hour, but let's see how we do. So today's presentation is on commissioning project management using top-rated commissioning software and industry-best CSU processes. So you're about to get the #1 commissioning project management framework to manage capital project commissioning. And like I mentioned a bit earlier, this discussion is meant to be interactive. So please pull up the chat window. And if you have any questions as we're going through the presentation, shoot them into the chat window and I'll get your questions answered. I'll also have a Q&A at the end to get all your commissioning questions answered. So by all means, shoot me a question and we'll get you the commissioning information that you're looking for. And while you've got the chat window open there, drop a message in there where you're calling in from and maybe what kind of type of projects you're working on. That'll be helpful. Now, I've used the commissioning project management frameworks that we're going to go through here today on several projects. I've used these commissioning project management frameworks in the power industry, working on hydroelectric generation generating projects, as well as HVDC transmission projects. I've used these same frameworks in the aerospace industry, building satellites and rockets for the Canadian Space Agency. I've also used these same commissioning project management frameworks in the water treatment industry, where we're expanding and upgrading a wastewater treatment plant facility not too far away from here. I'm also on the organizing committee for the Commissioning Professional Society, where we host an annual event to get all the best and the brightest commissioning minds in one room and discuss the challenges that are being faced in the industry and how to elevate the importance of commissioning on projects. Now, I'm not the only one getting results with this approach to commissioning. We've helped several other people in projects get the same results on projects. For example, Sheldon or Jonald or Kale and many others over the years. After working with us, they all tell me that this was an eye-opener. They had no idea of everything that was actually required for commissioning. They all tell me after working with me that this was the first commissioning system they've found that fully matches with what really happens at site. And that's because it is. This isn't theoretical information. This is real world experience to help you get your projects complete. They all tell me they knew they needed a commissioning system, but they had no idea where to start. And we helped them develop everything that they needed for their commissioning to be successful. And you can get the same results on your projects as well. You can see all the people that we've helped. If you go to our website at commissioningandstartup.com, at the top, there's a link where you can click on success stories. And you can see how we've helped so many people over the years get their projects ready for commissioning. So I know that these processes and tools are great stuff, and they're helping a lot of people, and they can definitely help you on your projects too. So just to be clear, though, this is not technical commissioning. If you're here trying to figure out how to do an electrical high pot test, or if you're looking for ASHRAE or NEBB building commissioning, HVAC test and balance, if you're looking for specific flushing standards for food grade piping, you're not going to get any of that here. That's not what this presentation is about. But technical commissioning is not actually what's missing on projects, though, is it? There's a lot of smart people working on projects, and they'll get the testing completed one way or the other. What's missing on projects is the structure that's supposed to go around the technical commissioning. What's missing on projects is the organized approach to complete capital projects at the end during commissioning. So let's look at a simple org chart. There's always three main functions on a project, right? We need to get it designed, and then we need to get it built during construction, and then we need to get everything tested to make sure it's working during commissioning. Or if you've got an EPC contract, your design and construction may be part of the same group. All this still applies to either contract structure. There is typically someone to manage the design, and they're managing the design teams in all the disciplines, and they're following design best practices. And there's always someone to manage construction. There's an entire industry dedicated to construction project management. But where are the project management tools and processes for commissioning? On a lot of projects, they don't even exist. There's a gap in the industry for sure. Sometimes we only see a single line in contracts for commissioning, and commissioning is left to the end of projects for people to scramble and try and figure out later. So what do you think happens when the last part of your project, the most complex part, when everything has to start working and come together as one system, has no structured processes to finish your project? There's a gap in the industry for sure, and the last 20% of projects often goes undefined. And it's no wonder projects are late and over budget when project teams have no system to finish projects. And no, your spreadsheets are not a system to finish capital projects. There is a gap in the industry for sure, and this is the gap that we help you fill. This presentation is for project owners that want to get contracts right from the start of projects to properly define how their project will be completed during commissioning, for project teams that need a commissioning system to complete commissioning as efficiently as possible, and anyone that's tired of projects being late and over budget due to poor commissioning. Without a system to complete commissioning, when commissioning is left to the end, or when paper and spreadsheets are used for tracking, projects are just gambling. There's no way to control the end of your project during commissioning. It's the Wild West. All you can do is just roll the dice and hope for the best at the end. It's a complete crapshoot. Let's get that fixed for you, and I'm going to show you how. I'll show you what's required in contracts to set the stage for a successful finish during commissioning. I'll show you the top-rated commissioning software to use. I'll show you the industry best processes to follow so that you can successfully complete projects during commissioning. And at the end of this presentation, if you'd like some more help getting your project set up for commissioning, I'll show you how with the services that we offer to give your projects the best chance of success. So if this all sounds interesting, then I'm glad you're here. So first, I want to share some statistics with you that are quite concerning. This is Professor Bent Flibberg. He's from the University of Oxford, and he's compiled a database of over 16,000 projects from the last several decades. He's also written a book. It's called How Big Things Get Done. If you haven't read it, it's an excellent book. You should check it out. Professor Flibberg's research shows that only 8.5% of projects are on time and on budget. That means over 90% of projects are late and over budget. That's terrible. Can we not do any better than that? The construction industry definitely has a terrible track record and is stuck in some old ways of doing things. The complexity of completing projects during commissioning is one of the main contributing factors to delays when there are no systems and controls for commissioning, when it's just left to the end as the Wild West. A lot of projects ignore commissioning until it's too late. They're missing important aspects in contracts, or they're still using paper and spreadsheets for commissioning. But these outdated methods no longer work. Now, to be clear, there are certainly lots of challenges in the construction industry, and a good book to read is Built to Fail by Todd Zabel. It's a brand new book. It only came out earlier this year in January. And Mr. LaBelle talks about all the things wrong with the current approach to design and construction and talks about what to do to fix it. And with these challenges that exist in all phases of projects, it definitely means that you need to have a robust system for commissioning to be ready to face these challenges and ensure you can successfully complete projects. We're focused on getting you fully prepared to succeed with commissioning with the best tools and processes you need for commissioning, so all groups on projects can work together for project success, and so you're ready to face any challenge that comes your way during commissioning. When I do this presentation, the first thing a lot of people want to know about commissioning is just tell me what to do. Just give me the checklist or just show me the steps to follow. For example, just tell me how to commission an LNG plant. Just give me the steps for that. Or just tell me the best software to use and I'll follow that. And when I hear these questions, I already know these projects are in trouble because there's a little bit more to it than that. You're never going to find a single document that shows you the steps for commissioning, and you're not going to find that magic software that tells you how to commission your projects because each project is different, right? And you need specific processes and tools applied to your specific commissioning circumstances. So first, let's address the problems of what not to do for commissioning before we talk about what to do. We know that projects are having problems. We know this because the data tells us this, right? That 9 out of 10 projects are late and over budget. Projects are losing time during commissioning and they're missing their in-service dates. But why is this? Why are projects struggling with commissioning? We need to address these problems before I teach you what to do. Now, there's 2 common mistakes that are made on projects, and just by fixing these 2 mistakes, projects can see huge improvements. So what are these 2 mistakes? The first mistake is leaving commissioning to the end of projects. We've all been told for many decades that commissioning takes place at the end of projects, right? We need to finish construction and then we need to test things at the end. But this is actually not true, and this is hurting a lot of projects. This is, of course, what most projects do is they roll the dice at the end with their fingers crossed, and maybe you've had this experience on projects, but this is what leads to problems on projects. In fact, to be successful, the commissioning process starts right at the beginning of your project, during your procurement contract processes and during your feed processes. We need to make sure that contracts set the stage for successful completion of projects during commissioning, and we need to be implementing our commissioning software during feed to manage our commissioning processes. When commissioning is left to the end of your project, there's no way to be proactive. All problems are left to the end of your project and there's no time to recover. There is no systems-based approach to completing projects. Everything gets jumbled up at the end, and the damage is done before on-site testing even starts. It's exactly like Stephen Covey says in his book, 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. His habit number 2, begin with the end in mind. And we must be doing this on our capital projects by having commissioning project management processes established right from the start. You must have a clear vision of your project objectives right from the start before you even begin, which means you must have visibility and clarity on how to complete your project during commissioning and startup, especially when you're working with such large project teams. Think about it. You want your project to be successfully completed, so you better define what success looks like during commissioning right up front in contracts. You must be planning projects from right to left instead of what projects typically do, planning projects from left to right. This is the only way to meet your project objectives. There's just no way to successfully complete projects unless you have a clear vision of what success looks like during commissioning. It's really like that for everything, right? Projects are no different. Imagine getting on a plane and having no idea where you're going. You just show up at the airport and pick a random gate. Is this going to get you to where you want to go? Of course not. At the highest level, your project objectives are to deliver high quality systems on time and on budget. And the only way to meet these project objectives is to achieve successful commissioning and startup. Therefore, everything you do on projects, all design and all construction activities must be done with the clear objective to achieve successful commissioning and startup. And I'm going to show you how to do this. And this is why it's critical to implement structured commissioning processes early in projects so that objectives are clearly defined for everyone to see and understand how their role contributes to successful commissioning and startup so that all project groups are aligned with the same objectives. When projects do not start with the end in mind, they quickly get off track with no clear direction of how to get to the end, when there is no clear definition of what success looks like during commissioning. So mistake number 2 is a lot of projects are still using paper and spreadsheets. And really, we're in the information age, right? They're still using paper and spreadsheets to track completion of complex projects. And while this used to work 20 years ago, projects are just far too complex, right? There's just too many documents and too much information. And there's no way to keep track of all of this stuff manually in Excel anymore. You can try, but pretty soon you get bogged down updating lists, and you have lists of lists. You have so many lists, and it's just brutal. I've been through that exercise, and it's just killer to try and manage everything manually in Excel. It never goes well. We need real-time data to make informed decisions. We can't wait until Friday's spreadsheet update to get the info we need. We need access to information now. If we're working on something on a Tuesday morning, we need to know that by 3 o'clock on Tuesday in the afternoon that the items were actually completed, because we're going to reset and plan the work for Wednesday. We need real-time information to make real-time decisions. Successful project teams are no longer using paper and spreadsheets, and I'll show you what they're using. When projects use paper and spreadsheet, there's just no way to show everyone what success looks like during commissioning. Your random rows and columns in spreadsheets are never going to define something as complex as commissioning. It's an inefficient way to get the job done. Your spreadsheets will never give clarity to design and construction groups on what's required for commissioning and what commissioning is all about, so they can understand. And when everyone has different ideas about how to finish projects during commissioning, it's super difficult to complete a project when everyone is going in a different direction and everyone has a different idea of what success looks like during commissioning. With no clear view of what's required for commissioning, project teams spend more time talking about the work rather than actually getting the work done. We don't need more meetings to talk about the work. We need a better way to organize our teams so we can actually get projects completed. When projects make one or more of these 2 common mistakes, when they're leaving commissioning to the end, or if they're still using paper and spreadsheets to manage commissioning, we call this cowboy commissioning. When projects suffer from cowboy commissioning, the work is extremely inefficient. You miss your deadlines. Everything is a last-minute scramble. Commissioning is incomplete. Your systems are likely extremely unreliable, and you have lots of problems over the life of the new facilities. So let me just pause here for a moment. Is this making sense? Is there any questions so far? What's been your experience on projects? Have your projects gone well, or is your typical experience more related to cowboy commissioning? Or maybe you're in a project right now. Do you think it's heading towards cowboy commissioning? Let me know in the chat what some of your experiences are. All right, let's start with the processes that are required for commissioning. And then after this, I'll review the software that you need to implement these processes. So there's 3 frameworks that are required for commissioning project management. There's our commissioning planning frameworks, our construction completion frameworks, and our on-site commissioning and startup frameworks. And these 3 parts are what makes up the integrated completions process. When you establish integrated completion processes earlier in your projects, everyone starts with the end in mind, with a clear picture of what success looks like during commissioning. You reduce the risks on your projects, and you eliminate the chaos of cowboy commissioning. You can complete commissioning as efficiently as possible, saving your projects millions of dollars and months of schedule. And most importantly, we're able to deliver high-quality systems that can be used for decades of reliable operation. However, when you're not following integrated completion processes, it may seem like you're making progress until your on-site commissioning begins, right? And then nothing works and things are missing and there's constant delays. You're losing time during commissioning and it's a scramble to get things finished at the end. You're faced with costly delays and you end up with cowboy commissioning that takes much longer than planned. Without integrated completions processes on projects, well, what do most projects try to do? They focus on design and they focus on construction, and commissioning gets forgotten about. They dump all the earlier design and construction problems on the commissioning guys with fingers crossed, hoping they'll figure it out. But all this does is defer all your risk to the end of your project. Now, what I've described there, this is of course what most projects do. They have their fingers crossed and they're hoping that things will work in the end and that the commissioning guys will sort it out. But what really happens every time is the blame game starts, finger pointing of what went wrong earlier, and all your commissioning guys can do is point out all the mistakes that you made much earlier in your project. Your claims start to pile up, and I guess the plan is just to fight it out in court. But this is hardly a good approach to finishing projects, even though this is what a lot of projects do. There is a better way. When you start your projects with the end in mind by implementing the integrated completion process starting much earlier in your projects. But first, why is it called the integrated completions process? Well, that's because commissioning project management must be integrated into all earlier stages of projects. So during your procurement processes, commissioning needs to be involved in preparing engineering and construction contracts to make sure that the right points, the right commercial, the right project management aspects are included in contracts to define how your project is going to be completed. Commissioning needs to be integrated into design processes to implement lessons learned from end of project back to the beginning of project so we can continually improve and make sure our designs are aligned with what's needed for later in the project. Commissioning needs to be integrated into construction processes to make sure that quality requirements are being met. And commissioning needs to be involved in construction completions process. This is a critical point in time to transition from construction to completion to make sure that takes place smoothly. It's the only way projects are successful when you implement commissioning project management early in projects to give your projects a strong finish during commissioning. So let's go through each framework that's required in the process that's required to set your projects up for success that ultimately gets defined in your commissioning software. So the first element here is our planning frameworks, and there's 10 project management frameworks that are required here. The first one being contracts. So when we're setting up contracts, commissioning needs to be involved for setting up engineering contracts and particularly construction contracts. There's key elements that are required to define the end of project. Usually when we look at contracts, they're pretty light on details for commissioning. Maybe there's some technical commissioning requirements, but I rarely see anything in there for commercial or project management requirements for contracts. Contracts are often used to get the work started, but they also need to be a tool to get the project finished. And when there's nothing in there for commissioning, then your contracts are useless at the end of your project. It's just a fight to figure out how to get through the end and tough it out. So we need to make sure that the right elements are in construction contracts for definition of static completion, sequence of activities, and what that construction transition looks like to get into commissioning. Those elements are critically defined, need to be critically defined in contracts. So the second element is our feed processes. Commissioning needs to be involved in feed processes from a lessons learned perspective. So a lot of projects, I'm sure you've gone through a lessons learned activity, but projects are usually pretty terrible at incorporating those lessons learned. Sure, you went through the lessons learned meeting and created that nice document, but it quickly gets filed away and forgotten about. Well, this is the process to incorporate those lessons learned, is to have commissioning and operations involved in preliminary design reviews, in detailed design reviews to make sure that design teams are creating what's actually required that aligns with later stages of the project during commissioning and operations. There may even be some more detailed design reviews for more complex functions, say your control and protection systems or HMI screen displays, to make sure that these principal user interface points align with what's required for later in the project. So we need to be making sure that commissioning is integrated into feed processes. The next is our factory acceptance testing and integrated factory acceptance testing. So I'm sure you're familiar with a lot of the typical testing that would be required for basic equipment, like testing a pump in the factory, run the pump for a few hours, test 3 points on the pump curve. We're all pretty familiar with that. We've been doing that for decades. But when it comes to more complex equipment, like a control and protection cubicle that has software integrated into it, it's critical that we test both the hardware and the software in the factory to know that these systems function correctly before they get to site. A lot of projects skip that and try to do their integration on site, and that never goes well. That always delays things. Control and protection is a very complex system, and we need to be testing those properly integrated in the factory, both hardware and software, to make sure that these systems work before they're delivered to site. So our next element is our project systematization, and this is one of the main reasons to have commissioning involved earlier in the project, to make sure that as designs are being prepared, we're also systematizing the project in a way that identically aligns with the project startup sequence. We must be taking a systems-based approach through all phases of projects, through design, through construction, and through commissioning, so that it aligns identically with our project startup sequence. I see this happen too many times, that the design guys want to deliver their design packages a certain way and construction wants to build it a certain way. Yeah, that's all great, but it doesn't align with commissioning and startup. So everything's out of sequence, everything's out of line, and it causes huge delays at the end of the project. Anytime you think you're saving by optimizing design or optimizing construction sequences that are out of alignment with commissioning, that can end up in years of delays if that's not done properly. So we must be taking a systems-based approach through all phases of projects to know that this is going to come together successfully at the end. So the next element is our gated commissioning workflows. Based on how we've systematized the project, then how is each system or subsystem going to flow through our gated commissioning workflows when it comes to completions, pre-commissioning, commissioning, startup? What are those milestones that need to be achieved? What are the gates that are going to be monitored for each of these systems and subsystems? How are each of these systems or subsystems going to flow through our workflows that we can have confidence that we know everything is complete at each of these gated milestones? So then as we're developing a lot of these planning elements, we'll get to a certain stage where we'll need to define our commissioning software. We'll have enough a definition in our equipment tag lists, how this is systematized, and this all gets loaded into our commissioning software. Commissioning software and how it needs to be or is expected to be used needs to be defined in contracts in how engineering groups, how construction groups, and how commissioning groups are all going to interact with this completion software so that we can manage the construction completion process and hand over to commissioning processes. So what software we're going to be used, how our gated commissioning workflows are going to be modeled in software, how our systematization is defined. This is all loaded into software to give everybody that visibility and clarity on what success looks like during commissioning well in advance before we start any on-site testing. So further through our planning process, we'll have developed our commissioning sequence. We'll be able to apply our dates and durations to develop our complete commissioning schedule. And so once this is complete, this all gets loaded into our commissioning software so that dates are driving the activities of what's required, when it's required, and where systems and subsystems are within each of our gated commissioning workflows. You'd be familiar with the forms and certificates. Those have been used on projects for the longest time. But when I say forms and certificates, this isn't the paper documents maybe that you've seen in the past. This is formalizing this within our commissioning software in what are the forms, what are the sign-offs that are required through our gated commissioning workflows, and how are these tracked in our commissioning software? More importantly, who has the authority to sign off each of these forms to mark completion of each of our milestones within our gated commissioning workflows? So this is all modeled within our commissioning software and our commissioning processes that we'll define in detail so that nothing gets missed. Checklists and procedures, same thing. We'd be familiar with a lot of these for commissioning over the last several decades, but now these are formalized within our commissioning software system. So we don't have paper and spreadsheets tracking all this stuff anymore. All of our checklists, all of our procedures, these are digital forms loaded within our commissioning software, tracked and information entered in our commissioning software so that nothing gets missed, everything's tracked, everybody has visibility on where everything is in our commissioning process. And the last item here, not because it's the least important, but the commissioning team is relied upon heavily from a safety perspective. A lot of the equipment experts are part of the commissioning team and being relied on to make sure that these startups are taking place safely. So we need to have our PSSR processes defined in advance. We need to be working closely with our HSC groups to make sure that we've got emergency response plans set up so that all of our safety systems and processes are established and set up and nothing gets missed so that each of our startups takes place as safely as possible and there's no damage to equipment and no injury to personnel. So those are the 10 planning frameworks that are required. The next element here is our construction completion frameworks, and there's 2 frameworks that are required for properly managing our construction completion. So you'd all be very familiar, I'm sure, with punch list walkdowns, but now this is the formal process to formalize this within our commissioning software, categorizing punch items, tracking them, ABC, all within our commissioning software, So defining that process and how that's going to work, how are joint walkthroughs taking place, how are punch items identified, how are they managed and tracked within software so that nothing gets missed. And when you're using these sophisticated systems and tracking them in software, every punch item is tracked. It's assigned to who needs to do it, when it needs to be done, and linked to the schedule, and all the details are in there. Everybody has visibility and nothing gets missed. The second element of construction completions is our subsystem static completion. And we see a lot of projects get this wrong, even like multi-billion-dollar projects, in the definition of what static completion is. Subsystem static completion, how we've systematized the project, is the definition of what's specifically required for each subsystem to define construction completion. So not only the physical aspects for all the physical equipment, but all of your documentation, everything that's required in a crystal clear definition of what that static completion is. So that goalpost is very well defined. Everybody knows what it is, and there's no ambiguity on what construction complete means. Everybody's definition on projects of done or complete seems to mean something different, doesn't it? Is done means something different to the commissioning guys than to the construction guys, than to the design guys. And when nobody can even agree on what done actually means, it's hard to achieve those milestones. This is the formal process to define that specifically. What does complete and done actually mean, so that there's no ambiguity and everybody knows what needs to be done to achieve those milestones. The question always is how to transition from bulk construction to systems-based commissioning. Well, this is how you do that. This is how you define that transition, by clearly systematizing your project, by clearly defining static completion for each subsystem and system, and by using software tools to keep track of each subsystem completion. And any other way that you're trying to do this on projects, random in the field spreadsheets, none of those work. You're all asking for trouble if you try any of those other methods. So the last item here is our on-site commissioning and startup, and you'll be familiar with a lot of these. This is the process to go through the 6 frameworks that are required here. So pre-commissioning, commissioning, startup, performance verification. People often ask me, well, what takes place during pre-commissioning and what takes place during commissioning? It's not critically important, because it's all going to be very specifically defined in our software, exactly what's required and when it's required. But you can think of pre-commissioning as equipment level testing, test the pump on its own. Commissioning is then a group of equipment. So say the pump, pipe, motor, valves, all the equipment working together as one subsystem. That would be the level of testing that's completed during commissioning. So once we've got subsystems functioning correctly, we move closer to our startup processes, introducing process fluids for the first time, or performing first main circuit element energization, say of 230 kV equipment, would be our startup processes. Once systems are operating, we can move into performance verification as we're achieving stable operation. Performance verification, of course, is any fine tuning that's required to get the systems to operate efficiently now that the processes are started up for the first time. Your contracts may define a trial operating period at the end of your project. If your project needs to operate for 3 days or 30 days or 90 days, however your contract defines that, to get through that trial operating period to then achieve handover of your systems to operating teams. So that's a very high level overview of the commissioning processes that are required for commissioning. And you can see there's quite a bit involved for commissioning to be successful, and your spreadsheets or using the wrong software, they just can't do all of that. So if you're still using spreadsheets, or if you're still using some old crappy software that your IT department forced you to use for whatever reason, it means one of two things. It means either you're doing all of this by brute force, or it means you're probably not doing any of this at all. And neither situation is good. It's not good for you and your project team, because you're burning out a lot of good people with brute force and driving them away from the industry. And it's not good for your projects, because you're leaving all the risk to the end of your projects during commissioning. And we know how that turns out, don't we? We know that 9 out of 10 projects are late and over budget with that approach. Okay, so now let's look at the software tools that are required to manage this process. When you use commissioning software on your projects, you can get rid of the brute force that's required to manually track in spreadsheets. Everyone on your projects has clarity and visibility of what success looks like during commissioning and how their role contributes to the end of your project success. And you're able to complete commissioning much more efficiently. Of course, when you complete projects more efficiently, that's going to result in saved time and saved effort at the end of your projects. You're able to start with the end in mind and plan your project for success well before commissioning even starts. However, when commissioning software is not implemented correctly, or if you're using the wrong software or the wrong system, or worse, you're still using paper and spreadsheets, you have no method to complete projects during commissioning. And when you have no method to complete your commissioning, what that really means is you have no method to complete your projects, period. Let that sink in for a moment. You have no method to complete your capital projects. That's pretty scary, isn't it? You shouldn't be starting projects if you don't have a robust method to also finish them. And without a method to finish projects, then you're going to require a lot of brute force. And we know that that never works because 9 out of 10 projects are late and over budget. So what do project teams try to do without a method to complete projects? Well, they try to track everything manually in Excel, right? They're all singing and all dancing Excel macros that they've perfected over the years. And they probably have a few people that are trying to manually keep these spreadsheets updated. And everyone's confused about what's required for commissioning. Things get missed and nothing works in the end. You miss your dates and the claims start to pile up. And we know that takes place 9 times out of 10. The list on the screen shows the 25 plus different commissioning software platforms that are available on the market. Some of these are real great options to choose, and you need to be using these on your projects. And we've tested each of these, and we know which ones are the best to use for your projects. Now, we don't sell software. We've never developed our own software, and we don't intend to. Any of the items on this list is not our software because we've never had to create software. There's actually some really good options that are already on the market. So instead, we've partnered with the best software companies for each industry for power systems, if that's renewables, wind, solar, substations. We've identified the best software to use for power projects. If you're working on oil and gas projects, there's a few good options as well. Data centers, mining projects, there's specific software to use. If you're in the chemical manufacturing industry, which is pretty huge these days for EV batteries, building hospitals, airports, pharmaceutical, semiconductor, water and wastewater treatment projects, there's an ideal software to use for each of these industries. And we know which one to use, and we can help you select the right software for your projects. More importantly, we can also help you how to use it, how to get your software set up with your project-specific workflows, and how to train your team on how to use the software, which is always a challenge, isn't it? So that when these systems are set up, everybody's ready to use them on their projects and everything goes smoothly. So if you don't have a copy of this list that's on the screen already, you can get a copy of it. If you go to learncsu.com, at the bottom of that page, there's a link where you can click on and you'll get this PDF. You can see the entire list of 25 plus software that's available. So not a lot of questions in the chat, but if there's anything that comes up, by all means, shoot me a question and I'll get it answered. So these software tools are certainly a big piece of the equation to finish projects. They're just not the biggest piece. Completing projects during commissioning is not fundamentally about software. Software is a tool to facilitate your project completions, right? Albert, please share the website, learncsu.com. That's the website you want to go to get that list of softwares. Now, I don't want you to think you can just get one of these software systems and it will resolve everything for your projects, right? All of these programs are extremely flexible, and out of the box, they're a blank canvas that needs to be configured on how you do your specific projects. Commissioning is complex, so naturally the software is complex too, right? I just don't want you to feel like you're sitting in the cockpit of a 737 trying to get your software ready for commissioning, which is why we help you get this stuff set up for your projects, so you're in the best position to successfully complete your project commissioning. So yes, what is systematization? So that's a clear function that needs to get loaded into these software systems. So think of that as chunking your project up into smaller parts, functional components of your project. Doesn't necessarily align with your WBS because that is kind of how your project is going to get started. But depending on how you want to start up your system, there's certain systems and subsystems that you're going to need in a very specific order to accommodate your startup sequence. So for example, huge multi-billion dollar project, whatever, one subsystem of your project might be your chemical dosing subsystem. So there would be, say, what, 20, 30, 50, 100 tags, whatever makes up that particular subsystem. Your project is systematized to identify that subsystem, tracked and loaded into software to define that sequence of subsystems that are required for your project startup. Is it possible to see a software main functions? Just some examples. Yep. If we want to have a chat after this, book a call and we can definitely go through what's required for some of those. I will caution you though that the software is one piece of the equation here, but there's a lot of other things that need to go into your software. So let's talk about what you need and see how we can get you set up, because I do see a lot of project teams using their software incorrectly, and the software is not actually helping their projects. It's hurting their projects because it's not configured correctly. It's not doing the right things. It doesn't have the right workflows. It's essentially just being used as a tracking database. And that's all. If that's all you're going to use software for, then stick with Excel. But these software systems are quite powerful, and you need to be leveraging the full capability of them to complete your projects on time and on budget. Commissioning is complex, and project teams need help to get these commissioning systems set up correctly, to know they're using the right software and have it optimized for their specific project conditions so they can complete projects during commissioning. Plus, I don't know too many people that are sitting around on their thumbs on projects waiting or trying to figure this stuff out. You're busy. You don't have time to sit through 2 to 3 software demos to try and figure this stuff out and evaluate a few options and pick the best one. You don't have time to fiddle around with setting up the software and learning how to use it and trying to get your team to figure out how to use it. That can be a big job to onboard your team with these new systems. It's just a complex process, and we want to help you with this. Why you give more importance to planning than on-site CSU? That's a dangerous question. The bulk of the work for commissioning takes place before on-site commissioning. If your approach is to skip all those planning elements, your on-site commissioning, I guarantee, will be an absolute complete shit show that will probably make you rethink your career decisions. Everything we're talking about in this presentation makes sure that your on-site commissioning goes much better. There's certainly lots of experts that are required for on-site commissioning, but all of the commissioning process, the bulk of it takes place before on-site testing even starts, if you want your technical commissioning experts to be successful. So without exception, on all projects, I can guarantee you the planning element is the critical aspect if you want your on-site commissioning to be successful. And you don't have to believe me. You don't have to take my word for it. But with that approach, 9 out of 10 projects are late and over budget, and yours will be too. So why are a lot of project teams still using paper and spreadsheets? Well, it's a tough transition to make, right? It's not easy to make this transition. There's lots of corporate bureaucracy. There's lots of hoops to jump through. And choosing the right software and getting it set up for your projects is a huge undertaking, right? I've seen too many projects start using software and then realize 6 months later that they can't actually use it. It's not saving them any time, and it's not meeting their project needs, and they have to start the whole process over and try and identify new software to use. The thing about these software platforms is if you have great commissioning processes, you'll love them, but if you don't have great processes, you'll absolutely hate them. And most projects are not super process driven. By the last comment we got there, if you're just focusing on your on-site commissioning, then you're not defining the processes that you need for successful commissioning. And when your projects aren't super process driven, then this software really isn't going to help you. Maybe in a lot of projects, we only see a single line in contracts that defines what success looks like during commissioning, which is why we see a lot of projects struggling with their new software. And we certainly don't want to take a bad commissioning process and digitize it. I don't want you to fall into this trap. We get you set up with the digital systems you need to complete projects so you can stay focused on getting your projects done and not have to feel like you're stuck in the cockpit of this plane trying to get this stuff figured out. I like the pre-testing of equipment on its own and then again once implemented in the entire setup. Well, that's fundamental to the commissioning process. If you're not doing that, if you're skipping steps in the process, you're in for a world of hurt later, 9 times out of 10. All of the old ways of doing commissioning, they don't work. And don't believe me, but the data says that 9 out of 10 projects are late and over budget. So if you want to stick with the old ways, then 90% of you will fail. We need to be implementing integrated completions processes much earlier in projects if you want them to be successful. Okay, so these are the 2 common mistakes that are made on projects: leaving commissioning to the end of projects, like focusing only on your on-site testing, and still using paper and spreadsheets and having no defined processes to manage your commissioning. These are the 2 main reasons why projects are struggling with commissioning. And if you fix just these 2 things, you'll already have made huge improvements on your projects. So we've talked about a lot of good information today. We've talked about how to structure contracts that define what success looks like during commissioning. We've talked about the commissioning processes that are required for projects to be successful. And we've talked about the software tools that are required to manage your commissioning processes. When all of these items are structured correctly on projects, they create your complete commissioning ecosystem where all of these items work together so you can successfully complete your project commissioning to achieve your project objectives, which of course is delivering high quality systems on time and on budget. When one or more of these items are missing on your projects, when your contracts are missing commercial or project management aspects of commissioning, or when you're missing processes starting earlier in your projects, or when you're missing the proper software tools for commissioning, it's unlikely that your projects will be successful. The data tells us this, that 9 out of 10 projects are late and over budget, and you can't really dispute the data, can you? You don't have to take my word for it, but you can't dispute 2 or 3 decades of historical data saying that the old way of completing projects doesn't work. 90% of projects are late and over budget. So if you're not doing this stuff, your project will be too. So you need to build a robust ecosystem for commissioning if you want your projects to be successful. Cowboy commissioning just does not cut it anymore. And only focusing on on-site commissioning just does not cut it anymore. Projects are complex and they need to be implementing these processes if you want your commissioning to be successful. So what is your opinion about ICAPS? Yeah, ICAPS has been around forever. It was kind of like one of the original software systems that are available. And if you're working on a Total project, then you probably will be using that. But I've seen some of the more recent systems that have been developed, say, in the last 5 or so years that are quite advanced and quite sophisticated that ICAPS may not be your best option. Some of the systems that are out there are quite powerful and make commissioning a lot less daunting than you've seen in the past. We have a preferred system and one that we use. It's not ICAPS, but some of the other systems are quite good and quite powerful. And we do have some recommendations if you're looking for a good system. Now, if everything we've talked about today is still not enough of a reason to get this done on your projects, to complete commissioning as efficiently as possible and to save time and money on projects and to deliver high quality systems on time and budget, in my mind, that does seem like a pretty compelling reason to get this done in your projects. But if all that's still not enough, here's 3 more reasons why you need to get these systems and processes implemented on your projects. There's a huge labor shortage on projects. I'm sure you're aware, and you're not going to attract the skilled labor you need with your old paper and spreadsheet processes to manage commissioning. The younger generation is demanding better ways to work. They're coming to projects with their mobile phones in hand, and they expect mobile apps that can make their jobs easier. And these systems exist. They don't want to be frustrated with your spreadsheets. They want a better way to work. So if you want the people you need to work on your projects, then you're going to have to start implementing this stuff on your projects to get the right skilled labor to build your projects. Next item, fundamentally, you need to protect yourself when things go wrong on projects. And despite everyone's best efforts, there will always be things that go on wrong on projects. Undocumented commissioning is not good for anyone. I've been part of several claims negotiation processes trying to determine what took place during commissioning. And when there are only bits and pieces of information tracked in spreadsheets, it's hard to show what was done for commissioning. And really, if it's not written down, then the only thing you can do is assume that it never happened. Even if you have tested stuff in the field, but you're missing records showing that it was completed, well, if there's no documented process, it never happened. In some cases, groups are trying to say commissioning is complete, but have no records to prove it. In other cases, groups have had to go back and redo testing that they've already done, but they didn't have documentation for. So don't put yourself in this legal situation. Get proper systems in place so everyone knows what was done, so these legal disputes can be avoided. And another reason, we know that the AI tools are only going to continue to improve, right? It's everything in the media that you hear these days, and they're probably going to improve at a much faster rate than you can imagine. And if you're not gathering this commissioning data on your projects, then you'll have nothing for the AI tools to analyze as they continue to improve. The project teams that will be able to take advantage of the advanced AI tools that we know are coming are the ones that are implementing these systems for commissioning now. And the ones that are still using paper and spreadsheets in a couple of years from now, well, they're going to get left behind even further. So now's the time to get these systems and processes in place on your projects because the technology is coming, whether the construction industry is ready or not. So it's clear you need commissioning systems and processes for your projects to build your proper commissioning processes into your project delivery strategies if you want your projects to be successful. So the question is now, how are you going to get this done in your projects? And the way I see it is you have two options. You can do it yourself. You can try to do this on a few projects with trial and error approach on your next 2 to 3 projects. But trial and error is a pretty expensive way to figure this stuff out when there's so much time and money on the line with projects. And we see projects often get this wrong, even huge multi-billion-dollar projects that you would think have this stuff figured out, but they don't. You need to get this stuff right the first time on your next project rather than have your projects go millions of dollars over budget as you try and figure this stuff out. You can try to do this with your existing consultants and ask your big consulting firms to prepare for commissioning, but they don't know how to do this. They will, of course, tell you that they do, but why do you think 9 out of 10 projects are late and over budget? It's because your big consulting firms are not preparing your projects for commissioning like you think they are. It's not really fair, though. It's not their area of expertise. They understand technical commissioning from a design perspective, but they don't understand the commercial and project management aspects that are required for commissioning. And it's far too late in your project before you realize that they haven't really given you what you needed for commissioning, did they? Besides, the big consulting firms have been trying to figure this out for decades, and they clearly haven't because 9 out of 10 projects are still late and over budget. So let's have a chat and see if you're really getting what you think for commissioning from your big consulting firms. You can go select software on your own and you can try and get it set up. And a lot of project teams do try to do this, but software is only one small piece of your commissioning ecosystem. It's just a tool, really, right? You need to know how to implement the tool properly. And all other parts of your commissioning ecosystem, like your contracts and offsite testing and the commissioning processes you use, you won't get these from your software vendor. The processes that you implement for commissioning, these are what will determine if your software is successful. So don't fall into this trap that software will solve your commissioning problems. It takes a little bit more than that. You can try to navigate your corporate bureaucracy on your own and work with all your project stakeholders to try to get this set up right. And maybe you can, but more likely you get exhausted from the constant red tape and roadblocks and just give up, because it's a lot easier to just stick with the status quo rather than try to navigate your corporate bureaucracy, right? An easier approach is to get a commissioning consultant, someone to guide you through this process to make sure you don't make any mistakes along the way. As your commissioning consultant, these are the things that we help you with. We give you everything you need to get through your corporate bureaucracy, so you're empowered to have the internal discussions you need to have and to make sure that you're successful in implementing positive change within your company. With our help, you're empowered to bring meaningful and lasting change to your projects that improves how you deliver projects and complete commissioning. We make sure your contracts are complete and that all the required commercial and project management commissioning details are included. And this is a hard thing to do, to know what to include in construction contracts years in advance before commissioning. And this alone, when you get contracts set up properly at the beginning of your projects, this alone will save you millions of dollars and prevent lots of headaches at the end of your projects. And I see this happen every time where there's not the right things included in contracts and commissioning is a mess at the end because of it. So you need to make sure you get this set up right. We'll help you establish your commissioning workflows to align with how your project is systematized, get all your gated commissioning workflows loaded into software, because these are essential if you want to have a well-managed commissioning process. We'll get you set up with the best commissioning software, the best software that's specific to your projects and specific to your industries. And we also create all the checklist documents that you'll need within the software, so you don't have to spend time creating any of this. And we've got all the training material you need to train everyone on your team to show them how this all works and how your project comes together at the end during commissioning. We really want to show everyone working on your projects what's required to successfully complete projects during commissioning. So we do also provide expert witness services to help you sort out what went wrong with commissioning during claims negotiations, but we really much prefer to work with you earlier in projects to get this right in the first place. So get our support now so you don't need our help later to sort out the mess during commissioning. When you get our help, you're able to give everyone on your project team a clear vision of what success looks like during commissioning, which is, of course, essential if you want to complete commissioning on your projects as efficiently as possible. It's way too risky to try and do this on your own. There's just too much time and too much money on the line, and your project needs expert guidance to make sure this goes well. Don't try to navigate through all of this on your own. There's just too many landmines at every step along the way, and we'd like to make sure you can avoid them so you can get to the end of your project successfully. With our help, we bring you and your organization all the way from the deepest depths of dysfunctional cowboy commissioning all the way to the most robust commissioning strategies that are part of your overall project delivery to set your projects up for the best chance of success. With our help, there's no more planning projects from left to right because that never works. You and your project team are finally empowered to start with the end in mind and properly plan projects from right to left, which is the only way to plan projects if you want them to be successful. So with our help, you can finally break out of the old way that it's always been done, which has never really worked anyways, and reject the old ways that projects have been stuck with for decades and start implementing projects as they need to be done to be successful. So engage us as your commissioning consultant, and we'll help you navigate through the complexity of commissioning so that you can successfully complete projects. Don't leave commissioning as an afterthought. Get the specialized support you need now to ensure your project commissioning is successful. Now, I'm sure you're aware that most projects are not doing the things that we've discussed today. They're stuck in their old ways, which is crazy because that means they don't have a method to finish projects. And that's pretty scary that people start projects and start spending millions or billions of dollars, but then have no method to finish projects to stop the spending. And when you think about it that way, it's no wonder projects are late and over budget when they don't have a method to finish projects. We guide you from point A to point B to get you to the end of your projects successfully during commissioning and make sure you can complete commissioning as efficiently as possible. Look, there's going to be lots of challenges on projects, but commissioning doesn't have to be one of them when you get our consulting support to get this stuff right. There's going to be design challenges and there's going to be construction challenges that try to push you off your path to success. So you better get your commissioning house in order so you're ready to face these inevitable challenges and stay on track to finish your projects. We've seen what works on projects and we've seen what's missing on projects when it comes to commissioning. So don't try to figure this stuff out on your own because that doesn't go well for 9 out of 10 projects. Get our support so you can get your project set up for commissioning success before it's too late and your projects spin out of control. We do this all the time on all types of projects, and we know what's required in contracts to set the rules of the game years in advance to plan for success. And we know how to implement industry best tools and processes to set your projects up for commissioning success, so your project teams are empowered to do their best work. And we know you're busy on projects. You need to stay focused on the issues you're dealing with today. Commissioning may not be a priority now, but it sure will be in a few years from now. And the actions you take and the decisions you make today will determine your commissioning success in the future. You need someone who knows what to do today so your commissioning is successful in the future. Our dedicated team gets you everything you need for commissioning, and we get you results fast. So you have everything you need for commissioning success well in advance of on-site testing. So you can rest assured knowing that you've done everything you can to ensure your project can be successfully completed during commissioning. If you're undertaking a capital project that requires commissioning, then you need a commissioning consultant. And we should definitely have a chat, because I'm offering you a gold mine of information and lessons learned here to give your project the best chance of success during commissioning. There's no reason to reinvent the wheel when there is an entire knowledge base of industry expertise that we can give you to show you what successful project teams are doing to successfully complete projects during commissioning. And we've made it super simple for you to apply this expertise to your projects. All you have to do is go to learncsu.com and click on the big purple button that you see on the screen. Tell us a little bit about your projects and schedule a meeting to discuss how we help you and your project team get ready for commissioning. You mentioned need support. That means we do need the software, or still we have to have a software. You definitely need a software system on your project that manages all of your commissioning processes. You likely or may need some help defining the processes that need to go into that software so that you can manage commissioning successful. So the support that we give is great for organizations that want to make sure their projects are successfully completed during commissioning, regardless of who's doing the commissioning and regardless of any specific contract structure. You get your commissioning properly defined in contracts, and you get a proper definition of how top-rated commissioning software and processes are used to complete projects, so your project team is ready for commissioning. You get complete custom support that is specific to your projects, so that you can get all parts of your commissioning ecosystem in place with industry-leading methods to complete projects that meets your exact project needs. So go to learncsu.com and select a time to meet to discuss how we can get your projects set up for commissioning success. Every project needs expert guidance for commissioning because it's complex, and it's never really been easy to get this support on projects until now with our help. Our team does this all the time for all types of projects, and we have the industry expertise to get you set up for successful commissioning. There's no longer any excuse to continue with a cowboy commissioning approach to projects and only focusing on your on-site testing. Go to learncsu.com right away and schedule a meeting. If you're not the decision maker, that's okay. That's pretty common. Let's have a chat one-on-one first, or by all means, bring your manager to the call and we can discuss the support you need to get your projects set up for commissioning success. There's a reason that people come to us for commissioning project management, because we've seen what works and we know how to do it. We have certainty in what we're doing, and people want a proven method that actually works and produces results for projects. And what I've seen is you can literally change the entire trajectory of your projects when you have a clear and concise vision of what success looks like during commissioning. And that's what we want to have for your projects as well. So if you're serious about commissioning of your projects, go to learncsu.com and click the big purple button to get started. We'll discuss the next steps on how we can help you get your project set up for commissioning success. Now, if you do have all of this figured out on your projects, and this is exactly what you're doing, your contracts are bulletproof, you're using the best processes, and you have the best commissioning software on your projects, then keep up the good work, because we need more people like you that are helping projects to succeed. However, we know that a lot of project teams have not figured this stuff out on projects because, I keep saying it, 9 out of 10 projects are late and over budget. These are the projects that we want to help, the projects that are stuck with the old industry norms that no longer work. so you can complete your capital project commissioning as efficiently as possible to achieve your project objectives. So let's make this easy for you. Go to learncsu.com and we'll discuss the next steps to get your project set up for commissioning success. All right. So how's everybody doing? We're finishing basically right on time, and I do have some additional time for Q&A. So please ask any questions that you have in the chat, and I'll get your questions answered. I do get a few common typical questions at this point in the presentation, so I'll just go through them here as you add your questions to the chat there, and we'll get them answered. So people often ask, well, why do I need commissioning software? Our spreadsheets have been working just fine for us. Well, that's likely because you're relying 100% on people since you don't have a process or tools to complete projects. And that's not going to get you very far. When you only have one of three parts required for commissioning to be successful, when your good people retire or when they move on to another project, then you've got nothing except for your old outdated spreadsheets that nobody understood in the first place anyways. You're certainly not going to be able to take on any more work because it's just not possible these days to find the skilled commissioning people that you need on projects. We need all three parts on projects, right? We need people, we need process, and we need tools. If you want commissioning to be successful, then if you don't have any of this, you'll continue to struggle if you want to rely 100% on people and burn them out with the chaos at the end of projects. Okay. Does Commissioning Specialist Association focus more on buildings than process industry? Do they publish guidelines and standards? Yep. CSA is all building commissioning. So if you're doing HVAC, test and balance, more of those simple processes, you can check out some of their stuff as well. What we focus on is the more complex commissioning, industrial commissioning. So there's certainly a building commissioning element involved in these projects, but I consider that kind of the first starting point. We need the building, we need the enclosure, we need the life safety systems and heating and cooling, but that really gets us started for the complex process commissioning, energy commissioning of the systems within the building. So we touch on building commissioning in here, but we focus on the more complex aspects of process and energy commissioning in the information that we've got here. Sometimes people ask is, well, why do I need commissioning project management? Isn't this all covered when you get PMP certified? And when you look at PMI's information, it's pretty light on details to finish capital projects. PMI covers and has lots of good information on how to start a project. They briefly cover some aspects on quality management, but there is nothing on the processes or tools that are required for commissioning project management. The stuff we help people with isn't included in PMP. And I think this is why there's so much confusion in the industry about commissioning, is because finishing capital projects during commissioning isn't well understood or isn't taught to project managers. Systems and controls for commissioning are the missing part of what's required to actually finish capital projects. So if you're planning to get your PMP, that's certainly a good thing to do, but you'll still be missing how to finish projects, which finishing projects isn't that really the fundamental part of projects, is being able to complete them successfully. So sometimes people ask me, does this apply to all industries? Now, there is a distinction between technical commissioning and commissioning project management. All projects, of course, do technical commissioning differently. Every project has unique technical requirements, right? The breakers to close or the valves to open, those are always project specific. The technical commissioning aspects are always different. Even two projects within the same industry, they're always going to be different, right? However, the processes and software for commissioning project management, this applies to all industries, regardless of the technical details. The same risk mitigating steps that we've talked about today, they need to be taken on all capital projects in all industries. It's always the same risk-based approach to manage commissioning so that your project-specific technical testing goes well. So that's the distinction between the planning elements before on-site testing and the actual on-site testing. The commissioning project management elements that need to take place to plan for your on-site commissioning, they're the same on all types of projects. So the commissioning project management principles we use, they apply to all complex projects. So process systems, energy systems, all complex projects involving mechanical, electrical, and automation equipment that needs to come together and function as one system at the end of projects. So to answer the question, yes, these commissioning project management principles apply to all industries. In your opinion and expertise, which software is more completed for oil and gas industry? So the oil and gas industry is huge. There's lots of commissioning required for oil and gas. So there's actually a few different systems that are tailor-made for oil and gas industry. So book a call, we can have a chat, and I can see what you're looking for with regards to software there. So some people ask me, well, this all sounds good, but they're busy and they don't have time for this, right? And I totally get it. Projects life is super busy. You're getting several hundred emails a day, but that's why we're here. We know you're busy, and this is what our team does day in and day out. We take care of all the details to get this done for you so you can stay focused on your projects. So you don't want to leave this stuff until it's too late and the damage is already done on your projects. If construction contracts have already been awarded on your projects, then I've already caught you at the wrong time. And I wish I would have had a discussion with you earlier to get this stuff set up properly. However, if your contracts are awarded and people are already working on projects, it's not too late to start getting this stuff set up properly on your projects. If you ignore it any longer, though, you will be in for a lot of hurt later at the end of your project. So contact us at learncsu.com and get the help you need. We can advise your project team so you know that you're getting what you need for commissioning success. Okay, cool. So I don't see any more questions in the chat. We can end it here for today. So please go to learncsu.com, click on the big purple button, and let's discuss how to get your project set up for commissioning success. I want to empower you with the knowledge and expertise so that your projects can successfully be completed on time, on a budget. It kills me reading headlines in the media of another failed project, and it's just absolutely not necessarily when you get this stuff right on your projects. Get the help you need to get this stuff right on your projects. Don't leave it until late, until you're in the middle of commissioning and you're in a world of hurt and your project is bleeding money with 1 or 2 years delays trying to sort this stuff out. Get the help you need to get this stuff right. So watch your email. I will send you a link to this replay. You can watch it again, or you can share it with others that might need to hear this discussion. And I'll also send you the link to the page that's on the screen so you can schedule a time to meet and we can get your projects ready for successful commissioning. So I want to thank everybody for joining. Lots of good questions, and I really do want to help your project succeed. So book a call and we'll chat soon. Have a great day.